From the PEP Radio Newsroom, I'm David Moore with this special report about the separation of church and state from the Associated Press. Rejecting church and state separation is on the wish list for Trump's Religious Liberty Commission. One member calls for a presidential Medal of Freedom for a baker who refused to create a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. Another calls for court interventions by the Department of Justice on behalf of Amish parents fighting New York vaccine requirements and Catholic nuns challenging that state's requirement that they accommodate hospice patients' gender identities. And the chair of the Religious Liberty Commission is calling for a federal hotline with this automated recording. There is no separation of church and state. These are just some of the recommendations that members of the advisory panel formed by President Donald Trump last year want to see included in the commission's final report. That report is still in the works, but commissioners had an opportunity to describe their wish lists during their most recent meeting in April. There was little dissent, as the commissioners, most drawn from Trump's base of conservative Christian supporters, covered the items they want in the report. Their ideas reflect the prevailing perspectives on the definition of religious liberty among many conservative Catholic and evangelical activists, increasing avenues for religious expression in public schools, expanding opportunities for faith-based organizations to receive public money, and allowing for religious-based exemptions in areas ranging from labor law to classroom lessons to healthcare mandates. Such views have also been reflected in Supreme Court decisions issued in recent years by its conservative majority. So the commission has been criticized for having narrow views. Critics of the commission say it embodies a one-sided perspective of Trump's supporters and is threatening a well-established constitutional separation of church and state despite the chair's claims. A lawsuit by a progressive interreligious coalition argues that the commission fails to comply with federal law requiring advisory panels to feature diverse members and viewpoints. The lawsuit echoes criticism that most commissioners are conservative Christian clerics and commentators. One is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. The coalition says members have asserted that America is specifically a Judeo-Christian or Christian nation, and notes that most commission meetings took place at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, an institution with Christian leadership. The Republican administration is asking a federal court to dismiss the lawsuit. The government is citing legal technicalities and contending the law does not define how a commission should be fairly balanced or whose viewpoints should be represented. Another entity created by Trump, the Task Force to Eradicate Anti-Christian Bias, issued a report saying Christians face discrimination under the administration of Democratic President Joe Biden in areas such as education, tax law, and prosecution of anti-abortion protesters. Progressive groups said that report failed to document systemic discrimination, focused on causes favored by conservative Christians, and amounted to advocacy rather than an actual investigation. In a further interlocking of Trump-related initiatives, several members of the Religious Liberty Commission are scheduled to take part in a May 17th prayer event marking the country's upcoming 250th birthday. Several also participated in a recent Bible reading marathon staged largely at the Museum of the Bible. Harmony and tension within the commission. The commission has mostly featured agreement among members with one dramatic exception. One commissioner, Carrie Prejean Bowler, was ousted in February after a contentious hearing on anti-Semitism. Commission Chair Dan Patrick said Prejean Bowler sought to hijack the hearing, in which she had sharp exchanges with witnesses about the definition of anti-Semitism and defended commentator Candace Owens' denying her record of anti-Semitic statements. Brejan Bowler, a Catholic, contended she was wrongly ousted for expressing her beliefs. In other hearings, witnesses described how they defied workplace regulations that they said conflicted with their conservative religious values or on gender, abortion, COVID-19, vaccines, and other topics. Some said they were prevented, at least temporarily, from displaying a religious symbol at work or trying to sing a Christian song at a school talent show. At the hearing devoted to anti-Semitism, Jewish witnesses spoke of being harassed and threatened at campus pro-Palestinian protests against Israel. The commission has also heard from some Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and other witnesses. Some, right, sure they have. Even so, critics said the commission mostly focused on conservative Christian and right-leaning political grievances. The Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch, president of the Progressive Interfaith Alliance, one of the groups suing over the commission's composition, said the panel's omissions are as significant as what it focuses on. He said the commission has failed adequately to address such issues as anti-Muslim efforts in Texas and elsewhere, and also the rise of anti-Semitism on the right, not just the left. And so, what is the separation of church and state debate? Rauschenbusch said he is especially worried about the commission chairs challenging the very notion of church-state separation. Patrick, a Republican who is the Texas lieutenant governor, repeatedly denounced a concept that is embedded in Supreme Court precedent. We need to say there is no separation of church and state, Patrick said at the April meeting. That's a lie. He suggested printing 1 million bumper stickers to that effect. No one at the commission meeting disagreed. Trump made similar comments at a prayer event at the White House in 2025. They say separation between church and state. Trump said, I said, all right, let's forget about that for one time. While the phrase separation of church and state does not appear in the Constitution, 20th century decisions by the Supreme Court cited Thomas Jefferson's description of the First Amendment as creating a wall of separation between church and state. The court applied the First Amendment's prohibition of any church establishment to the states in addition to the federal government, citing the 14th Amendment's ban on states denying citizens' rights. Courts have since wrestled with how to balance freedom of religion and freedom from government-sponsored religion. Concerns touch on schools, vaccines, workplaces, and more. Patrick has advocated for prayer and 10 Commandments postings in public schools. I don't have any malice toward anyone that doesn't believe in any type of faith, Patrick told fellow commissioners. That's fine. That's what America is about. But these organizations that are pushed by some ideology and pushed by someone's bank account who wants to remove God from our country, we need to push back. On other issues, various commissioners called for requiring schools and workplaces to post notices of the rights of religious expression and exemptions. Some called for restoring full pay and pension benefits for military service members who were discharged for refusing COVID-19 vaccines. Bishop Robert Barron of the Catholic Diocese of Winona, Rochester, Minnesota, called for enabling religious groups such as Catholic Charities to receive federal money without compromising on traditional church teachings about the family. He also said Catholic immigrants in detention should have humane treatment and access to sacraments, and that immigration agents should not disrupt worship services in enforcement actions. The administration last year eliminated a policy against immigration enforcement in sanctuaries, which other religious leaders said should not occur at any time. Kelly Shackelford, president and chief executive officer of the legal organization First Liberty Institute, called for new requirements that governments pay all legal bills if they lose a religious liberty case. He said many individuals lack the money to challenge the government in court. That would be a huge shifting of power in favor of citizens, he added. As a side note, nowhere in this article is there any mention of Buddhism, Hinduism, briefly there's a mention, or the religious views of indigenous Americans. And what of agnostics and atheists? Should their views be completely discarded? Could it possibly be that the reason we have a separation of church and state is to assure that the people, that the government will not make decisions on behalf of those people they serve based on religious principles? And if they do, whose principles take priority? We would love to have your input. Please take our poll on the PEP Radio YouTube channel to let us know whether you support the separation of church and state. From the PEP Radio Newsroom, I'm David Moore.